crossing paths. The screech of tires pierced the quiet night as Julian Mercer took the corner too fast in his flame-red Maserati. At 25, with his father's billions backing his every whim, Julian lived in a perpetual state of invincibility. His two hands gripped the leather steering wheel. His two eyes narrowed against the rush of adrenaline as raindrops splattered across the windshield. The party at the elite Skyline Club had been disappointing. Same faces, same conversations, same emptiness. Another waste of a Friday night, he muttered to himself, pressing harder on the accelerator. The rain was coming down harder now, slicking the road into a dangerous mirror of city lights. Julian's phone buzzed. Probably his father. Alexander Mercer, tech mogul and notorious micromanager. Wondering why he'd left early again, 3 miles away, Zara Chen wiped her two hands on her apron, fingers cramping after an 8-hour shift at Mel's Diner. At 23, she balanced full-time engineering classes with 3 jobs to make ends meet. Her scholarship covered tuition but little else. Tonight, her 5 fingers on each hand ached from carrying plates, and her 2 legs felt heavy as she changed out of her waitress uniform. "See you Monday, Zara," called Mel, the owner. "Get some rest, kiddo." Zara smiled, her 2 eyes crinkling at the corners despite her exhaustion. "I'll try. Got a fluid dynamics exam to study for tomorrow." The rain had turned the 10-block walk to her apartment into an unwelcome challenge. Pulling her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, she stepped out into the downpour, wondering if she'd have enough left in her account for next semester's textbooks. Julian never saw the oil slick. One moment he was flying down Highland Avenue. The next his car was spinning wildly, all control lost. The world became a blur of lights and motion until a sickening crunch of metal meeting concrete brought everything to a violent halt. The Maserati slammed into a concrete divider, the impact deploying airbags that knocked the wind from Julian's lungs. Dazed, he struggled to make sense of his surroundings as a thin wisp of smoke began to curl from beneath the crumpled hood. Zara was crossing the intersection when she witnessed the crash. The expensive sports car careened into the divider just 50 feet ahead, the sound of impact making her jump. For a moment she froze, then saw the first lick of flames emerging from the wrecked vehicle. "Oh my God," she whispered, dropping her bag and running toward the car. The driver was moving inside, but sluggishly, clearly dazed. The flames were growing quickly, feeding on leaking fuel. Without hesitation, Zara rushed to the driver's side, her heart pounding. The door was crumpled but not sealed shut. Using all her strength, she wrenched it open to reveal a young man, blood trickling from his forehead, struggling with his seatbelt. "Can you move?" She shouted over the hissing of the rapidly growing fire. "We need to get you out now." Julian's unfocused 2 eyes found hers. "What happened?" "Your car's on fire. We have seconds, not minutes." Zara reached in with her 2 arms, fingers working quickly to release his seatbelt. The heat was intensifying, the flames beginning to lick at the dashboard. Smoke filled her lungs as she hooked her 2 arms under his and pulled with everything she had. Julian felt himself being dragged from the wreckage by surprisingly strong hands. His 2 legs refused to cooperate fully, but somehow they were moving away from the car. Behind them, the flames found the fuel tank, and with a whooshing sound, the Maserati was engulfed. The last thing Julian saw before darkness claimed him was the face of his rescuer, determined, fierce, and unlike anyone he'd ever known. Aftermath and gratitude, Julian awoke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the sterile scent of antiseptic. His 2 eyes fluttered open to a ceiling of fluorescent lights that seemed to pulse with his throbbing headache. When he tried to move, pain shot through his right leg and along his left arm where bandages covered second-degree burns. "Don't try to sit up," came his father's voice, uncharacteristically gentle. Alexander Mercer sat in a chair beside the bed, his normally impeccable appearance rumpled from what must have been hours of waiting. "You've been unconscious for nearly 18 hours. What happened?" Julian asked, his throat raw from smoke inhalation. "You wrapped your car around a concrete divider," Alexander replied, his 2 hands clasped tightly together. "The police said the vehicle caught fire immediately after impact. If someone hadn't pulled you out," his voice trailed off, the tech mogul unused to displaying vulnerability. Julian's mind flashed with fragmented memories, screeching tires, the impact, and then a face. A woman with determined eyes and strong hands who'd appeared from nowhere and saved his life. "There was someone," Julian said, struggling to sit up despite the pain. "A woman pulled me from the car." "Where is she?" "I need to thank her." Alexander shook his head. By the time the ambulance arrived, there was no one else at the scene. Just you, unconscious on the sidewalk, a safe distance from your burning car. Over the next 3 days, as Julian recovered enough to be discharged, the mystery of his rescuer consumed him. The hospital staff knew nothing. The police report mentioned an unknown Good Samaritan who had disappeared before first responders arrived. Even the local news coverage of the accident of Alexander Mercer's son made no mention of who had saved him. Julian's 2 legs were unsteady as he left the hospital, his 5 fingers on each hand still bandaged where they'd been burned, but his determination was unwavering. Something had changed inside him the moment that stranger had risked her life for his. It took him 2 weeks of searching, visiting nearby businesses, reviewing traffic camera footage his father's connections had secured, placing newspaper ads seeking information. Finally, a break came from a gas station attendant who remembered a young woman in a waitress uniform running toward the crash that night. "She works at Mel's Diner," the attendant said. "Always stops in for coffee before her shift. Real nice girl. Engineering student, I think." The following evening, Julian found himself sitting in a booth at Mel's Diner, his 2 eyes scanning every server until he spotted her. She moved efficiently between tables, her 2 arms balancing plates with practiced ease, her 5 fingers on each hand moving with graceful precision. It was unmistakably her, the same determined expression, the same quick movements. When Zara approached his table, she froze momentarily, recognition flashing across her face. "You're alive," she said simply, her voice softer than he remembered. Julian looked up at her, emotion tightening his throat. "Thanks to you. You disappeared before I could thank you." Zara shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "The ambulance was coming. I had an exam the next morning. Besides," she added with a hint of a smile, "I didn't do it for the thanks." "Have dinner with me," Julian blurted out. "Not here. Somewhere nice, please." Zara's 2 eyes studied him with amused skepticism. "Why?" "Because you saved my life," he said. "And because I'd like to know the kind of person who runs toward a burning car instead of away from it." For a long moment, Zara considered him. Then with a slight nod, she replied, "I'm off at 9, but I pick the place, somewhere I can afford to pay my half." Julian smiled, feeling something he hadn't experienced before, a genuine connection that had nothing to do with his family name or wealth. Deal. 2 worlds apart, the small Vietnamese restaurant was nothing like the establishments Julian typically frequented. No valet parking, no sommelier, no reservation needed. Just incredible food served in a family-owned place where Zara greeted the owners by name, her 2 arms receiving warm hugs from the elderly couple who ran the kitchen. "Their foe saved me during finals last semester," she explained as they settled at a corner table. Julian watched her 2 hands cup the steaming tea the owner had brought without being asked, her 5 fingers on each hand wrapped around the mug for warmth. "You said you're studying engineering?" Julian asked, trying not to stare at the woman who had dragged him from certain death with her own 2 hands. "Mechanical engineering with a focus on sustainable design?" Zara nodded. "Full scholarship, but the living expenses are all on me, hence the glamorous waitressing career." Her smile was self-deprecating but proud. As they talked, Julian realized how limited his world had been. While he'd been racing expensive cars and attending exclusive clubs, Zara had been working 3 jobs to support herself and her grandmother, all while maintaining a near-perfect GPA. Her 2 eyes lit up when she spoke about her dreams of designing affordable green housing for low-income communities, the very people his father's tech empire often displaced. "What about you?" she asked finally. "What does the son of Alexander Mercer do besides crash sports cars?" Julian winced, his 2 legs shifting uncomfortably beneath the table. "Officially, I'm VP of Special Projects at Mercer Technologies. Unofficially, I'm a disappointment who hasn't found his purpose yet. And what would your purpose be if your father wasn't deciding it for you?" The question struck Julian like a physical blow. No one had ever asked him that before. Their dinner stretched to 3 hours, and when Julian insisted on walking Zara home, she didn't object. Her apartment was in a neighborhood his father's driver would have locked the doors while passing through. But Julian found himself noticing the vibrant street art and the sounds of families through open windows. "This is me," Zara said, stopping before a worn brick building. "Thanks for dinner. Thank you for Savvy." Burning bridges, building love. Over the following weeks, Julian found himself drawn deeper into Zara's world. He met her at the engineering lab where she worked on her sustainable housing prototypes, his two eyes taking in the elegant simplicity of her designs. He joined her for late-night study sessions at the 24-hour coffee shop, where the baristas knew her order by heart. When her car broke down, he used his two hands alongside hers to help repair it, rather than simply buying her a new one as his father would have expected. For her part, Zara began to see beyond the privileged facade. She noticed how Julian's 5 fingers on each hand moved with surprising dexterity when he helped her with a design model, revealing an untapped talent for creating rather than consuming. She saw his genuine interest in her friends' lives, the respectful way he listened to her grandmother's stories of immigrating to America, with nothing but hope and determination. "You're different from what I expected," Zara admitted one evening as they walked along the riverfront, their two arms occasionally brushing against each other, sending electric currents through them both. "What did you expect?" Julian asked. "A spoiled rich boy playing at being normal before returning to his tower," she said honestly. "Instead, you're—" "What?" "Lost," she said softly. "Talented, kind, but lost. Like you've spent your whole life following someone else's map." The truth of her words resonated deeply. That night, as they reached her apartment, the tension between them finally broke. Julian's two hands gently framed her face, his 5 fingers on each hand trembling slightly as he leaned in. Their first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered in the space between heartbeats. Zara's 2 arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer as the kiss deepened. They stumbled through her apartment door, a tangle of limbs and whispered confessions. Her small studio felt more like home than his penthouse ever had. In the gentle darkness, Julian's 2 eyes took in every detail of her, not just her physical beauty, but the strength in her 2 arms that had pulled him from the fire, the determination in her face that had kept them both alive. His 2 hands explored her with reverence, his 5 fingers on each hand mapping constellations on her skin. Their 2 legs intertwined as they discovered each other with increasing urgency. "I'm falling for you," he whispered against her neck, the admission terrifying and liberating all at once. Zara's response was to pull him closer, her 2 arms holding him as if she'd never let go. The next morning, Julian received an ultimatum from his father. Alexander had investigated Zara thoroughly and found her unsuitable. The choice was clear: end this distraction, or lose his position at Mercer Technologies, his trust fund, his entire inheritance. For the first time in his life, Julian felt no conflict. That evening, he arrived at Zara's door with nothing but the clothes on his back and a certainty he'd never known before. "My father disowned me," he said simply when she opened the door, "and I've never felt more free." Zara's 2 eyes widened in shock. "Julian, you can't—" "I can," he interrupted. "I want to. If you'll have me, I want to build something real, not with my father's money, but with these." He held up his 2 hands. "Will you teach me how to create something that matters?" That night, as they lay entwined, Julian realized that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you truly need. Rising from the ashes. 3 months after Julian walked away from his inheritance, Alexander Mercer made his move. Zara received a letter offering her a full scholarship to a prestigious engineering program in Switzerland, an opportunity that would separate her from Julian and effectively end their relationship. "It's a manipulation," Julian said, his 2 hands clenched into fists as Zara showed him the letter. "He's trying to remove you without seeming like the villain." "It's also an amazing opportunity," Zara pointed out, her 2 eyes troubled as she paced across the small apartment they now shared. Her 5 fingers on each hand fidgeted with the edge of the paper. "This program accepts 5 students worldwide each year." Julian understood her conflict. In the months since his estrangement from his father, he had found work at an architectural firm that valued his unexpected eye for design. It wasn't wealth, but it was purpose, something he'd discovered with Zara's encouragement. But he knew how much her career meant to her. "If you want to go, I'll support you," he said finally. "We could try long distance or—" A knock at the door interrupted them. When Julian opened it, his father's assistant stood in the hallway, impeccably dressed and uncomfortable in the modest building. "Mr. Mercer requests your presence at his office tomorrow at 10 a.m., she said stiffly. "Both of you," she added with a glance at Zara. The next morning, Julian and Zara entered Alexander Mercer's gleaming corporate headquarters, their two hands clasped tightly together. Alexander waited in his office, standing with his two legs planted firmly, his stance that of a man accustomed to absolute control. "The scholarship comes with conditions," Alexander said without preamble. "You go to Switzerland alone, Ms. Chen, and you," he turned to Julian, "return to your position here where you belong. Or," Julian challenged, "or I ensure that Ms. Chen's grandmother loses the lease on her apartment. I recently acquired the building, and I'll make certain no engineering firm in this country will touch her work, regardless of its merit." Zara's two legs nearly buckled, but Julian's arm steadied her. "That's enough," came a new voice. Eleanor Mercer, Julian's mother and Alexander's ex-wife, stepped into the office. Her two eyes flashed with a fury Julian had rarely witnessed. "You've gone too far, Alexander." Eleanor had built her own tech company after their divorce, one focused on environmental sustainability, the very field Zara was passionate about. Until now, she had remained neutral in the conflict between father and son. "Julian showed me Zara's designs," Eleanor continued. "They're brilliant. So brilliant that I've already offered her a development grant through my foundation. No strings attached, no conditions about who she loves." Alexander's face darkened. "This doesn't concern you, Eleanor. It concerns our son's happiness, which apparently matters more to me than to you," she replied coolly. "And it concerns innovation that could help thousands of people, which used to matter to you, before profit margins became your only measurement of success." Julian stared at his mother in shock, then at Zara, who looked equally stunned. "You don't have to choose between your dreams and us," he told Zara, his voice steady. "And I don't have to choose between my family and you, just not the family I thought." 1 year later, Julian stood beside Zara at the opening of their first sustainable housing development, a project funded by Eleanor's foundation and designed by Zara, with architectural elements Julian had contributed. His two arms wrapped around her waist from behind as they watched families tour homes they could actually afford. "We did it," Zara whispered, leaning back against him, her two eyes bright with accomplishment. Julian kissed her temple, his two legs steady beneath him in a way they never had been before. "No, you did it. I just followed you out of the fire." When Alexander Mercer's car pulled up to the development later that day, Julian tensed, but his father approached alone, looking older and surprisingly humbled. "You've built something remarkable," Alexander said, looking at the homes, then at his son. "Something I couldn't have envisioned." It wasn't quite an apology, but as Julian's 5 fingers on each hand entwined with Zara's, he realized it was enough of a beginning. Sometimes the most unexpected fires forge the strongest bonds, and from the ashes of what burns away, something far more precious can rise.